and welcome to the first Left Wing podcast of 2024. Will Slattery here with you, and I'm delighted to be joined by Luke Fitzgerald to digest all the rugby over the festive period and hit on all the major talking points that have popped up over the last 2 weeks. I hope all the listeners have had a nice Christmas and look forward to a nice New Year. Luke, how are you?
Good, Will. And then there were two.
I know,
Just
yeah,
the two
the
amigos.
OGs. Yeah, the lads, Rod Keane and Jonathan Bradley, taking a well-earned break this week, obviously. I think it's a break week for rugby this weekend, so the lads taking, as I said, a well-earned break after the festive period. Busy time for rugby, obviously, as you well know, Luke, throughout your career, while the rest of us are relaxing and pigging out and going out on the beer. You guys have to be a little more disciplined. What is it like for players? I've definitely asked you this before, but we've been going so long at this stage that what you said in year one is probably, it's 7 years old now, so we can revisit it again now. What is it like, this time of year, player-wise? What do you remember from your career when you had big games, Stephen's Day, New Year's Day, and all that?
Yeah, no, pretty miserable, Will. Don't think we ever did the Christmas Day training session, but we certainly had a lot of the Christmas Eve, obviously, which, in fairness, sometimes you could end up working that day as well. I think from time to time, I think I've worked that half day in work as well. So, yeah, look, it's tricky. I think the hard part is actually trying to contain yourself diet-wise. Like that's the most well, and the drink obviously as well. It's always nice to go out and have a few pints with friends and catch up with people, isn't it? Around Christmas period. So that was always a bit of a bummer. But no, other than that, I mean, look, they're great games and they're generally interpros. So you're definitely into it. You know what I mean? You're kind of buzzing for those games. And I think as well, I was always very conscious that this time of the year, given their interpros, right before that international selection window, isn't it? So I'm sure we're going to get into a bit of that now as through the show. But that was always that always helped focus the mind and ease the pain a little bit of not having that extra slice of turkey,
Yeah, exactly. And we got some high drama over the last couple of weeks, like especially yesterday. Like going into yesterday's games on paper, I was expecting them to be maybe enjoyable, but like Leinster Ulster will start there. Like what a win for Ulster! We've given them a kicking over the last couple of weeks, and I'd say justifiably they haven't been at their best. Got that big win over Racing a couple of weeks ago. Potentially that was the spark they needed, because what a victory to get at the RDS. What stood out to you about how they went about their business?
Well, I think you'd have to say the steely nature of it, Will, wasn't it? I mean, look, they obviously scored some great tries, and as much as I've given Billy Burns lots of stick over the year,
The first thing I thought of.
Yeah, I know. As I was watching, I was saying, "Oh
This
God,
one's
I'm
for
gonna
you,
have to
Luke
be."
Fitzgerald.
Well, look, you know what? You have to always be, when you got to give someone their flowers when they have put in a big performance, and I thought he was excellent. And I was pleased for him. Like that's a pressure gig up there, and there's been things haven't gone right. They've had lots of injuries at different periods, and that's a tricky job for an out half. Now, I still, I maintain my position on it, but what kind of disappointed me about Leinster is that regardless of how I've criticised Billy Burns over the years, I've always maintained his short kicking game is always excellent, isn't it? Like he's really good at those little chips in the middle of the pitch. His crossfield kicking's always good, and he really exposed Leinster very, very badly, I thought, at different stages in that first half. And I think, alongside his very good performance, and in fairness, the team performance, because there was lots of guys that held good positions to open up the pitch and to expose Leinster once they made breaks. I think that was very pleasing for them. It must have been very pleasing for them. And I think as well, look, the defensive side, because it was a real spirited performance. A lot of people stood up in that pack, thought Timoney was excellent. Kitsoff looks like he might be worth the cash. He was brilliant when he was on the pitch. So that'll be really pleasing for them, because he's going to be he's their marquee guy, and he'll be leading that pack alongside Henderson. So, look, brilliant team performance by them. They dug in really well, and they can be really, really pleased with that road win. It could be their Munster, South Africa, couldn't it? The last couple of weeks. You think of that Racing one, but that was a home game. The away games, I always feel like if you can dig in and get a few of those wins, that's what gives you that belief. And it can also help you with the consistency. You're not a week-to-week team, good at home, bad away. A few of those wins can really set you on a bit of a run. So I'm sure McFarland and the team up there, we'll be hoping that this is some kind of catalyst for this team to give them that little bit of consistency that we've all been really looking for, Will.
Yeah, and I think especially when you said it against their performance at the RDS last year when they had a big lead Leinster roared back in the second half. I think Keane Healy was sent off in the first half, so with 14 men roared back, it was a massive collapse, and then Ulster spiraled after that. So to go to the same ground again, as you said, show a bit of steel, hold out Leinster, because to be fair, the Leinster onslaught did come. Now, maybe Leinster will obviously be kicking themselves for coughing up a lot of chances, but Ulster did hold them out. So I think from that point of view, given what happened last year as well, it's probably even doubly satisfying.
Oh, it was, but like, look, Leinster were like, yes, they had themselves to blame. I think the one on 74 minutes with Frank Murphy, I think was, I thought that was a bad decision. Do you
The
remember the
counter
block
ruck.
then?
Was it
Sorry? No,
was
sorry,
the
the
one with
counter hook. Sorry,
yeah.
it was the kick over the top by Russell. He chased it down, catches Lowry. That was a bad decision. That was a really bad decision by Murphy. You could see, I think it was, I don't know if it was Alan O'Connor. Someone was in there from the Ulster side who was actually he was actually holding the ball from his side. So actually it was a penalty against him because the ruck had formed. But he gave it for Leinster. Kind of, they put massive pressure on him. They were obviously driving them backwards, and he gave it for, I think, I don't know who it was in the end, but maybe I think Doris was off the pitch at this stage. Someone put their hands down on the ground, but I thought the penalty was given already. I thought O'Connor had actually picked up the ball. He was the Ulster rucker at that stage. So I thought that was a bad one by Frank to miss. But look, it was really difficult conditions. I just felt like that was an obvious one to miss, and Leinster, I'm sure, will feel a little aggrieved. But look, they had other chances still, and even I thought Harry Byrne was really good when he came on. I thought he got really unlucky with that 50-22 attempt. Maybe, I don't know, was that on 72 minutes or something like that? That was really tricky and unlucky. You could see the head was in the hands there. That was unfortunate, but look, can happen in those conditions. The penalty at the end, though, Will, has to go to touch. I mean, he's too good for that. He's a really skillful player, That's never been a complaint in his game. And he's played in tough conditions the last couple of weeks, so that can't really be a complaint either, that it was, a bit of a shock to the system. So that was a bad miss for him. I actually thought he had a good second half. So Leinster did have some opportunities.
Just on the penalty at the end, like the thought did occur to me, Frawley and La Rochelle, 3 or 4 weeks ago, nailed it from like the halfway line with a bit to spare. I know it was inside their own half. I actually thought Frawley, they could have gone. I was like, they could go for the post here. Frawley, I think, had a big bit. Now he wasn't playing at half, so obviously I don't know if Harry Byrne felt he had the ownership of that moment. He was like, "We're going up the line," or the captain might have said, "Here, look, it's 55 meters you're talking about." So it was a low percentage kick, but just the way he kicked that one in La Rochelle, it was still going over the crossbar, despite being a 50-meter.
It's interesting. I had never thought about it. I hadn't even considered that as an option, Will, because I just feel like the two situations were quite different, weren't they? I mean, when you contextualize why you're taking that one in La Rochelle versus why you're taking that one against Ulster, pressure is different. I think the conditions might have been worse. Slightly, they were pretty wet up in La Rochelle as well, but slightly worse. I think the wind maybe wasn't. It was prevalent, but not as prevalent. Behind his back, I do think he probably would have had the legs, but the ground underground looked very, very wet. Did you see the ball? Anytime it hit the ground, it was like sliding through. It was pretty awful conditions. So I actually didn't have a problem with the option. I'd say Leinster felt like they might have been able to put themselves in a better position from that penalty and kind of work their way, maybe either get a penalty from Ulster, or I don't know, possibly put themselves in drop goal conditions. Although, as I said, the way the ball was dropping on the ground, I wouldn't have been keen on a drop goal option, Will. Look, I think to my mind the option was okay to go to touch, just the execution was poor,
It's only because of what I saw in La Rochelle. Literally, because similar distance, and he had the legs that day, and I thought there was a lot in the leg. And it wasn't just after the fact. Like as soon as the penalty was given, I was just assessing where it was. I was like, could he go for this?
I actually hadn't even considered it, Will. So it's interesting. That was the first thing you thought of.
Like Harry Byrne immediately picked it up. Like they kind of went up. They didn't discuss it. It was very quick up the line. So perhaps they were all like you, because it was so far out. They didn't even really give it a.
Well, I just think, to win the game, Will, you probably want to. I think they probably would have backed themselves, given that they were pressurising Ulster. They had. I felt like maybe, even though they'd gotten out of that, they'd obviously brilliant kick from Doak into the corner and worked their way back up to that position. Felt like maybe the momentum was possibly with them, and that Ulster pack was flagging, given they'd had that scrum pen as well just before. So maybe they felt like it was a lower percentage option,
Just to go back to Billy Burns and the kicking game, because just listening to Don McFarlane afterwards, I thought it was interesting that he was like, the way Leinster are defending this season, like they can be exposed by that sort of kicking game, and I thought it was interesting for him to say that. It's not something I particularly noticed this year that comes to mind, but do you agree with that
Oh,
or anything?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. I was on Premier on for the Leinster Munster game, and it was one of the things that I kind of picked out. But I actually wasn't allowed to show it because it was from the Sale match. If you saw the Sale match, how
Oh yeah, the
badly
try he
exposed they
scored.
were.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so they really
Yeah.
we couldn't show the clips. I said, listen, I'll clip up a load of these clips of Leinster getting exposed with kicking games, but they're like, well, that's cup game, so we won't be showing that. Yeah, look, if you look, Sale really exposed them. Obviously, there was a lovely set play where the nine put it, like, it was off a second phase and they put through a lovely grubber. Now that was a set play, but there was one at the start of the game and a few throughout where I think the start of the game, a Sale player actually slipped. They got down the side of the pitch and put through a lovely grubber kick, and the Sale player, I don't know if it was the winger or the fullback, actually slipped once the grubber went through, but they had Leinster dead to rights if he had stayed on his feet. So I kind of picked out a lot of that stuff for to focus on, and I actually thought, to go back to Ulster and to focus on what a good performance they had, I didn't just think that they exposed Leinster in the kicking game, and obviously for the try they did, were off that set play, but the passing inside was really, really prevalent throughout. Will, I thought that, the way Leinster obviously trying to push teams back into that space inside, the little pop passes back inside were really, really good throughout the game. So that takes a lot of bravery to do that in those conditions, and I thought they exposed Leinster there, combined with what I think has been pretty sloppy Leinster tackling. So it's all well and good to push people back into places where you want them to be. You still have to make the tackles, Will. I've had a big problem with this. Like, kind of Leinster players, they look like they're kind of. My worry about Nienaber coming in this system is that, yes, he is defensive expert, but the South African guys are such physical people. Like, they're like, they are perfectly built for this kind of game. They don't even have to hit you unbelievably perfectly for you to go down. They're such big men. I just wonder, you know, trying to impose this kind of South African mentality on a Leinster team, will it pay dividends? It's too early to say, and I don't want to be critical, but it is a concern I have. And also, if you do have a good kicking game, can you expose it? And I think so far what we have seen is that they haven't figured out how to cover those short kicks very well. So, is that something that they adjust to, or that they up the speed and come even harder off the line? But I don't know. I just feel like it's a very risky system. It's really good if it works. I do think South Africa can get away with it because they have such big bodies. They don't even need to hit you that purely to get it. But I think if Leinster are doing it, I think just from what I've seen of Leinster the last couple of years, I think they need to put in some serious time into their tackle technique. I think they're still diving at lots of things and missing way more tackles than they need to, and they're overextending themselves just a little bit. So it's my one worry with this system, Will. I thought it looked a little bit exposed on the weekend. However, I will say it is early days, just as with the La Rochelle win away in the really tough conditions where everyone was praising Nienaber, the new system, etc., etc. I didn't get too far ahead of myself on that. I think the conditions helped them there. I think there's still work to do on this, and the Leinster team still need to get a little bit more comfortable with it. And I think their accuracy levels have to go up, because I thought Ulster were brilliant. I thought they exposed them the kicking game, and I thought their passing and carrying was really, really good. So kudos to Ulster on that. It was a brilliant display, I thought.
Yeah, the break weekend probably maybe comes at a good time for Leinster, an extra training week ahead of the Champions Cup doubleheader, more time for the players to bed in with Nienaber, because he wouldn't have gotten a huge amount of training pitch time yet, because the games came thick and fast after he came in. Like, La Rochelle was his first match, I think, after he coming in, so obviously hasn't had a huge amount of time, I would have thought, on the
He was
training
in
pitch.
he was in for the Connacht one, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, sorry, that was his first game the week
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
So, it was a quick adjustment.
Couple of
And
tight ones.
just
Couple of tight ones so
yeah,
far, Will, hasn't he?
yeah,
I
no,
wonder if
to be
that a
fair,
trade. Like, this is the first tight one that he's lost, but he's had three on the bounce, where like Connacht obviously was that last minute Frawley try. Obviously the La Rochelle one was tight, but the Munster one was pretty squeaky bum time too, even though they got the kick at the end that made it kind of look comfortable. Like, they were all
yeah.
pretty rugged wins, weren't they?
Yeah, it's funny just on Nienaber. Like, I just listened. I saw a video on Instagram. He was on some podcast, an English podcast, and he's a very impressive speaker. Like, he really is. Like, I'd say the players will really benefit from having in Leinster a new voice. Obviously, Lancaster did great work, but he'd been there for 7 years. This is a real new guy coming in with new ideas, and he seems a real inspirational character, but also a very good man manager as well. Like, he seems to really be able to connect with the players I know himself and Sia Khaleesi have a very kind of deep relationship, it seems, and I think it'll be interesting just to see, even from a playing perspective. I'm sure that the players in Leinster are delighted to get a new character in with new ideas and a new way of doing things.
I'm not. I won't say any names to betray any confidences, but I live in the locale, Will, around UCD, and so bumped into a few of them around the coffee shops and spars, and yeah, no, the word has been really, really impressive, and quoting an old pal of mine in there, one of the older cohorts says he comes across really, really smart, really, really intelligent on the game. So yeah, look, I think he'd have a big impact. As you said, probably too early to get ahead of ourselves in the La Rochelle one, and again, still too early to be really, really disappointed with the Ulster and the Ulster performance, and to see some kind of trend that we're saying we're not happy with. I do think we're seeing some of the traits come through, but it's going to take time for them to bed in. And, he should be given the time. And let's face it, that was still a close game, and Leinster showed a lot of grit to get themselves back into it. Now, the argument is, did they really need to have to show that grit? Like, do you want to be putting yourself in that position? And I do think anyone watching this Leinster team over the last couple of years, yeah, the tackle technique, it's a basic thing, but they miss way too many tackles, and I think they need to get that sorted out. They're too good a team to be missing these ones. That's why I've been really harsh on it. Well, I know it probably seems like I'm a bit of a grumpy old man at this stage, but I really am. It's the one thing that I look at this Leinster team and say, that's a problem, because even against La Rochelle, where they have struggled with the size, and that's obviously been the big thing, obviously the Saracens conversation too, can they deal with the big packs? You know, I think that's been less of an issue. I still think that they have been actually missing big tackles in big games too often, and I think it's something that they need to have a look at themselves. And if they're not looking at it, it'd be a big worry for me if I was a Leinster supporter. Obviously I have to try and be unbiased, but where I'm not doing my podcast, I am a Leinster supporter, and it's something that I'm watching closely. Will.
Yeah, you mentioned at the start of the show, kind of like this time of year, kind of shop window ahead of Ireland squad selection. Like, anyone from an Ulster perspective now, having gotten that big scalp, who you might think, oh, they might be closer now to maybe getting a call up than you might have thought before yesterday?
I'd say maybe Stockdale. Stockdale might be looking like he might be getting back in there. I think he's had a couple of good weeks. Finished the tries well. Bit lucky at the end with that hitting his shoulder and dropping it. Wasn't he, the Harry Byrne kick? I thought that was really jammy, but he probably deserves a little bit of luck. He's had some bad injury luck. I like him. I think obviously concerns around him defensively, but I think he's gotten a little bit better there. He's a big man. He played well just before the World Cup squad was announced, probably just too little too late. So he's a guy I think maybe has a good opportunity.
Andy Farrell really likes him as well. Like, Andy Farrell's always
he's a big
tried
man,
to
Will.
bring
It's
him
easy
in.
to like a big guy, and he's quick.
Yeah.
It's easy to like a big man in rugby, in international rugby. You just need to be a certain size, unless you're a bit of a freak. Like, you're sick hearing me saying this, but unless you're like a Colby, a Shane Williams, or a Jason Robinson, you need to be a big man. You do. Otherwise, you're always under pressure. And he's a big man and a good finisher. So, Stockdale I think might get back in. And obviously Lowe, we don't know what the issue is there, but he obviously hasn't been around, so there might be an opportunity possibly there.
It looks like Mac Hansen picked up an injury yesterday as well. So, like, Mac Hansen, I think, got a shoulder injury yesterday. He could be potentially.
Saw that, although he's on fire. If he has one shoulder, he might be like. I know he had a few slice kicks against Munster now at different stages of the game.
Yeah.
Kind of end up being crucial. But from a guy who I didn't think, I just thought he was going to be kind of airy-fairy, like not great technically, struggle defensively. He has completely changed my mind. He's like one of my favorite players to watch, Will. I really, really love watching him play. I think he's such a snazzy rugby player now. Got it all. Great tackler. Really good on the ground. Gets you a poach or two. His kicking's brilliant. His ball handling is brilliant. And he's so good in attack, Will. He is actually one of the, like, I'm not going to say is he the most complete. He might be the most complete player we have. Natural flair as well, can come up with a big moment. I love watching Mac Hansen. From a guy who I swear to God, I was like, this is all hype, like silly haircuts and tattoos, but absolute quality player. Like, really love watching him play.
He recovered from, I actually think it could have been on New Year's Day a few years ago, Dan Sheehan stepping him for a try at the RDS a few years ago.
As time has gone on, that has looked less like a really glaring error to maybe being, well, that Sheehan's actually just a freak athlete, isn't he? But no, look, back to the Ulster guys. I do think that McCluskey now, maybe, I think, look, Aki had such a good World Cup, but McCluskey is, He was brilliant on the weekend. In messy conditions, you'd love to have him in your team. Um, Probably haven't seen enough of Hume since the World Cup, or I haven't really to really have a view on whether he gets back in or not. I think that race is going to be closer with Ringrose, because I think he might have caught up a little bit. And it's good to see him back from injury. But Marshall is obviously in there on the weekend, so hard to know whether he's done enough. Timoney definitely has been playing well. He could be someone that I think might work his way in there as well. Herring, but I know he's already in there, but I just can't see him pushing past Kelleher or Sheehan. But he was good on the weekend, and in wet conditions as well. The scrum, he apparently is a very good scrummager. So they're the guys that probably have sprung out. I think Henderson obviously as well had a great World Cup campaign. Real leader for that team, and it's a key thing for me with Ulster is kind of keep him fit, and he's kept fit, so that's been a good thing coming into Six Nations, that he's fit, because we know he's a quality player. So they're the guys, Will, I think, that probably stood out. I know hard to pick, but I'd say Stockdale's my if I was to pick one, he's the guy I'd probably be saying he's really improved his stock.
Other big game yesterday, Connacht Munster in the Sportsground. If you were a Munster fan who went on Stephen's Day to Limerick and then up to Galway yesterday, God, I hope you got some rain gear for Christmas, because you would have been absolutely
poor O'Donoghue
drenched
as well, Will. O'Donoghue,
Yeah.
and it looks like that looked like a nasty enough one with Jaeger as well. Hopefully that maybe just
Yeah.
a bad knock to the head. I didn't hear anything else, Will, did you?
No, I haven't yet. The injuries are just piling up by the game.
Yeah.
They've since we last spoke. Obviously, we spoke after their two disappointing Champions Cup weekends. They've since lost to Leinster and lost to Connacht, and picked up like a number of more injuries, all of them which appear to be serious. Now, if you actually look at the season as a whole, 11 games played, they've only won 4 of them. The injury list is huge. It's kind of gone off the rails results wise and injury wise the last couple of weeks. I still don't think like it's panic crisis necessarily, albeit the results have been poor, because I still think they're going ultimately in the right direction. But it's been a very bad couple of weeks on a number of fronts for Munster.
Yeah, look, there's obviously a huge amount of bad luck, but you do hear a few rumblings about maybe are they overtraining a little bit as well. I don't know if that's got out into media circles yet. I don't know if you've heard anything on that, Will, but I did hear that from someone in casual conversation who's kind of not close to it, but former player basically. And that'll be an interesting one to watch, to see if they think there's something there, because obviously they're going to have to assess. I mean, there's obviously some bad luck ones. The O'Donoghue one was a bad challenge by Ralston. I don't think there was any intention, but
do you think that was a red card?
I don't know. It's a bit reckless, isn't it? But I could see why he was trying to do it. And in fairness, O'Donoghue, I think what Ralston saw was like, oh, I'm late to this ruck. I better get in there quickly, get my body height right. And I think he might have felt like O'Donoghue was going to be coming towards him, whereas O'Donoghue actually went, I think, if I'm right in getting trying to put myself in the position, I think O'Donoghue kind of went left towards a Connacht player that was already kind of competing with him. So I think he anticipated a collision that actually never happened. O'Donoghue went slightly different way, but I don't know. Like, if you're O'Donoghue, that wouldn't be much consolation. And he did come in a bit reckless off his feet, and you could see I thought the top of his body weight was just too far away from his feet. To be able to control himself going in there. So I think he might have been a lucky boy to only get a yellow there, I think.
Yeah, initially I thought a yellow was probably right, but then I've kind of been reflecting on it, and like ultimately he came in from the side recklessly, hit him kind of low, kind of dangerously around the knee, and like they're the kind of challenges or the kind of clear outs you don't want to see in rugby. Like, so maybe a stricter sanction was required, just to kind of like, I know he didn't mean that. I don't think he meant to target his knee.
I think we all agree that one, Will. It's not a good look though.
But he was late. He was reckless. And he was in the side, and he ultimately did like get him in a really vulnerable position, the side of the leg. I'm just like, that's the kind of clear out we do not want to see. So maybe in this case or cases like that, you should just be like, that's a red card. And the next time Byron Ralston is late to a ruck, he'll assess his options maybe differently than what he did.
And he'll say, right, well, I've got to get him up straight away rather than actually like, you know what I mean? You got to take a chance that he hasn't got his hands on the ball, that you made a mistake, rather than trying to overcorrect and completely melt a guy, with bad technique. So, yeah, look, it's a tough one. You hate calling for a sanction for this one, Will, but like it doesn't look good. And in fairness, from O'Donoghue's perspective, like that's not much consolation to him, who's now
could be out for the
facing
season,
another couple of weeks on the sideline, maybe,
Yeah.
It looked bad, looked nasty, I think. So we'll wait and see on that one.
Yeah, it did. Graham Roundtree was, I know, very perplexed by that, and I think he mentioned the Jaeger one as well afterwards, which seemed a kind of a random collision. But he looked in a very bad way going off as well. Like,
Yeah,
because
I actually didn't. There wasn't a great visual on the Jaeger
yeah,
one. It looked like it was kind of an awkward collision. It looked like he got a. It looked like he was dipping down as well, though, didn't he? Is that was not the
mm,
mitigation in it? I think is that he had actually
yeah. Well,
dipped
Roundtree said it
down,
was
or
looked at, and they didn't take any action on that one at all. I don't think so. Like, but
yeah,
yeah, but
yeah.
to lose two more players, a Dogbo obviously went on Stephen's Day. They already
Oh,
have a lengthy injury list. Oh man, he hasn't played in a long time. And like, what do you make of where their season is heading now? Like, is it almost like just
oh,
get through this
it,
period and almost not think the next year, obviously, but they're kind of the Champions Cup hopes are probably pretty much dead. They're already outside the top 8 at the moment in the league. They'll obviously try to get back in there, but in terms of like winning another trophy this year, just with their
oh.
injury list and where they are at this stage, I just can't see it happening.
No, you know what? I think it's survival mode. Look, obviously they're going to be living in hope, and I think they've got a good coaching staff, some good young players. But I don't know. I feel like they're under massive pressure now. Will I don't know. Like it sounds like you're of the same mind. The only good thing for them is that they might get to have a bit of a look at some of the younger talent coming through, your Gleasons and Butlers and these guys. Maybe get more opportunities. Um,
I thought
the one
Tony
thing
Butler
though I
was pretty
would say,
good. What did you
sorry.
make of Tony Butler?
I thought he was all right. Yeah, I thought he
Yeah.
was pretty solid. Looks a small guy. I'm always I go back to that. You always be a little bit concerned about a guy who's not a big fella. Um, just coming up, you saw the few bits of contact that Aki had with him, who's obviously a very big man, but just looked like men and boys there a little bit. So hopefully he kind of fills out a little bit more on that one. But I'm not sure he has the frame to get too much bigger. So that'd be a little bit concerning for me as he goes on. Because you look at Crowley. Like Crowley was well able to mix it up with everyone. He's a good athlete. He's a big enough chunky guy, and he'd be able to survive most collisions. And looks like he's up for the physical battle too. So that's what he's up against. So it looks to me like that. He'd be on the back foot in that battle. Just based on that, not on the skills. But look, he looked good as well. Like, I mean, I was pleased for him. I think it didn't go too. Obviously, they lost the game, but it was. Yeah, he had a few good moments in it, I thought, as well. Nice
Yeah, one
50-22 was
lovely
a lovely play.
50-22.
Yeah, really nice 50-22, wasn't it? So that was a good bit of play, and that'll give him a bit of a lift. There was obviously a few other things, like maybe there was a bad block down I think it was in the first half. Speaking of blockdowns, how did Munster not finish? There was
Coombs,
two on the line. I was like,
Coombs, like Gavin
Coombs, like,
Coombs' error
unforgivable.
there. Like in a day where it's torrentially raining, points are going to
Oh,
be at an
what
absolute
is he doing picking
green.
it up, Will? Just put
Why are
the
you
thing
picking that
down.
up?
It was
Like
madness. I
I'd
know, I know.
expect, to be honest, I'd expect a lot more rugby smarts from someone like that, who's like a Munster starting number 8. He's been in an international setup. You have to know just to put your hand on that ball, and why you're trying to pick it up and put it back down when
I
you're
don't
knee
know.
sliding
Do
out.
you know what? Just not a natural finisher. Like I fell for him. It made him look like a bit of a plotter, like a kind of a real hard-working player without much smarts, which I don't
It
think
did.
he
No,
is,
that's
because
what
he
I'm
actually
saying. Like,
showed.
as in, but so he's a guy who's been in Ireland squads who Andy Farrell hasn't had much faith in, and like I'm not saying like Andy Farrell's going to point at that and be like, oh, that's why you're not there, but like I'm
You
thinking like
have to get that one.
another back
You
row
have to.
who's got challenging for Ireland international positions.
There's not
I don't
always
think
will.
makes that mistake.
The key thing is there's not one other back rower that would have made that mistake. Can you
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Any of the guys he's competing with wouldn't have made
yeah.
that
Like
one. So
Caelan
he looks a
Doris
little clumsy.
is not going to like pick
It
up. Oh,
happens.
yeah.
You make mistakes, but that was a bad one. It would have given them a huge lift at the start of the game and would have really deflated Connacht, I think. But even how they didn't get the tie, not the tie. I don't know who followed it up, but Ty Byrne got a good block close to the line as well. They didn't finish that one as well. So look, it wasn't just one. They definitely did have a few opportunities to put themselves in a way better position. But look, on balance, I think Connacht did survive very well in those moments, defended pretty well in the most part when they didn't put themselves in trouble through kind of sloppy, blocking of chasers and things like that to help get their kicks away. They actually were pretty good themselves. Do you know what has been interesting? I was actually meant to say to you, Zebo has been really good. I wonder, is there a chance that he might get back in? Now, he's not as good as Keenan, but he's
No,
bloody
but
good.
we were saying recently, I think it was after the Leinster Munster game when he kind of appeared for the first time in a long time and played really well. And I made the point that he's starting at full back for a province. So therefore, he is automatically, by default, almost like, in the reckoning. And especially given there's no cover for Hugo Keenan, really. There's no established 15. There's like Jimmy O'Brien could be there. Mac Hansen can play 15, but there's no out-and-out 15 cover. So, like, I think he is in the reckoning, especially with these two Champions Cup games to come in 2 weeks' time. If he plays back-to-back there, say, and plays really well again, I'd say there's a good chance he's in the Ireland squad.
He makes so few errors for a guy who does lots of like kind of he not flamboyant stuff, but he definitely does some kind of tricky, skillful stuff quite consistently. Takes nice lines across the pitch, brings other players in, has a lovely passing game, nice kicking game. His catching of the high balls, like he's been really, really solid
Yeah,
and really
in
standout
terrible
performer in that.
conditions, like
He looked,
terrible
and
conditions.
exactly in a couple
Yeah.
of games where the conditions have been awful, he's looked super, super solid. And he's actually a smart defender too. He never hits hard or anything like that. He's not going to hit you hard in a ruck or hit you hard in a tackle. Not that kind of player. But he rarely makes a defensive error as well, and he's hard to get past as well. So, no, I don't know. I think he's been playing great rugby. He's been a bit of a saviour for Munster in this period. So, I think interesting to watch that space about whether he gets back into Farrell's squad. I feel like when you think about how far back he's been coming from, just shows you a couple of good games. If you're starting, as you say, in one of the provinces, like you're only competing with three other guys, really. And in fairness, we haven't seen unbelievable showings from, a Connacht 15 or an Ulster 15, I don't think, over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's probably top 2 in the country at this point, but he might not get in the squad, which
well,
would be
he
weird.
has. I don't think he's been in an Andy Farrell squad yet, if I'm not mistaken. So there's, I don't know. Like to be fair, he hasn't played much big games since he's come back from wrestling. Like
he's had a terrible injury run. Yeah,
injuries, and he had an ill-timed suspension at one stage, and between that and a bit of form, like Andy Farrell hasn't really taken a look at him. And we've seen in the past, like say for someone like Jean Klein, who wasn't in any Andy Farrell squads, started playing a good bit, some good rugby, and Andy Farrell still was reluctant to bring him in. Obviously, he ended up going to South Africa. So I will be interested to see, like, does Andy Farrell prefer us to kind of work with the guys? And we've seen that with other international coaches. Joe Schmidt used to have guys he liked to have in his squad too. Maybe into the other people we'd be calling for occasionally that wouldn't get looks in. Like coaches do have the kind of the guys they like, and that might be enough to maybe keep Zebo out, unfortunately, even if he is playing well.
Yeah, because that's really the only basis that you will be leaving him out of the squad, isn't it? Like, it's certainly not on rugby playing ability, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I think, he's kind of, he can kind of be a bit, I wish I had another word, but vociferous is probably is the one that's come into my mind. Just about how he likes to train and how he likes to think about coming into a game, nice and relaxed and all that kind of stuff. And I just wonder how much that would suit what's kind of happening in the Ireland squads, Will.
But it would surely suit it more than it did when Joe Schmidt was the coach. Like by all accounts, it's a more relaxed environment now.
No, it is. I think when you look at Matt Hansen and these guys, but I still don't think it's that far away from that. Will I still think if you look at Matt Hansen's game, yes, his talk can be a little bit loose, but for the most part, his rugby has really improved. If you look at his technical ability from when he came to Ireland to now, like he's really been brought on as a rugby player. And yes, they play, with the ball more. They like to have the ball a bit more. They have more license to do a few more things, which will definitely suit Zebo. I still think they train unbelievably hard, and they're still, like to be kind of deep in the analysis, and they definitely don't leave any of the kind of mental stuff out of the game. So there's a lot of stuff that they have taken on from the Joe Schmidt era that I think, you wouldn't drop. You still, those standards are still pretty high, I think, and you do wonder, would he say, well, look, Zebo likes to, he's his own man. He likes to play a certain way. He likes to think a certain way about the game. He has oodles of ability. There's never any doubt about that. But does he fit maybe with the squad, or does he kind of upset things a little bit? That's maybe the only thing that you might say, particularly if you've got, a bit of changeover with Sexton, etc. That you have to deal with. Is that another thing that you want to include into the setup? Like, does it potentially upset things a little bit? I've never found Zebo to be like kind of disruptive or anything like that. Really, really good guy. But we all do know that, he does have a big personality and he has a certain way of thinking about it. Like, so I don't think there's any denying that. He's given interviews to that effect as well, that he just, he felt the setup was a bit constricting, So you would wonder, will it fit, or will he fit in there? So we wait and see. Like, on rugby playing ability, I think he definitely would be in there, Will, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like Munster and beating South Africa a couple of years ago, South Africa A, and how it was a big catalyst for the team. But he was like the only guy who played that night and played well, who didn't kind of get the just desserts. Like, it was a home game for him. He grew up very near Porky Queeve. He played class. He scored a try, and then between injuries and stuff, he never really got to kick on the way all the other guys that day. Like, I think it was Antoine Frisch's first game. He was class of the rest of the year. A few other guys played that day, and they went on to win the league and have great seasons. Whereas Simon Zebo, so I'd love to see, even just from a personal level, to see him get that bit of run of form or a run of fitness in big matches. And Ireland squad or not, even just to get that back. He hasn't even really got that since he's come back. So I just, on a personal level, would like to see
Oh,
him
look,
too.
I'm a big fan as well. I love how he plays. He was a good guy to play with as well. You know, and he's got all the skills, great kicking game, great passing game, and he could actually be with Earls and Conway both kind of leaving the setup this year. I thought this was going to be a big year for him. Now, obviously, it looks like they're kind of pretty much injury ridden, you know, and may not be able to, you know, that it might be just too late for them to get back in any kind of good position by the time all those players are back fit. Or they'd certainly have to do it the really, really hard way if they do. I thought this might be a big season for him as kind of a senior guy, bringing in Daly and Nash. You know, he could be the guy that kind of gels that back three and makes them pretty potent, because I do think Nankerville looks like a very good player, and I like Frisch. And I thought Crowley would have a big year too. So I actually thought this was going to be an even better year for Munster, possibly. But obviously, we're in the situation we're in at this stage, and it looks like it might be just, I don't know, I suppose managing their way through this and not making it too ugly based on the injury list.
Yeah, and then just on Connacht, like a huge win for them. I think they lost 5 in a row. Obviously, we talked before where they had this awful fixture list of like South African
Yeah.
trips and Saracens away, and that sickener against Leinster where they actually played well and still lost. So just to get the win, obviously awful conditions, but how impressive were you, or how impressed, sorry, were you with their kind of
Yeah, I thought
sticking
they
in the
were good,
fight, getting the
Will.
win?
I thought they
Mm.
were good. Like they do need to stop shooting themselves in the foot, though. I mean, they made that like those block downs. I mean, Munster, like on another day, like they probably should have been 14. That should have been 14 points for them, really. You know, and it didn't really take anything other than effort. Like you always want a team to have to, you know, pull something out of the bag or a beautiful piece of skill to break you down or something like that. Will, but you never want to be doing it to yourself. And I just think if you look at Connacht, they've had a couple of weeks of that now. I think the Leinster one would have been really deflating for them. I'm glad you mentioned that one, because I think that was probably what led into those two Heineken Cup games, you know, where they just looked a little bit jaded or just didn't look themselves. I know they put up a decent fight in terms of points that they scored against Saracens, but conceding over 50 was embarrassing. And then the Bordeaux match at home, not good enough. I think they're a better team than they showed there. So I was really pleased for them. I was glad they got the try at the end, because it kind of put a little bit of a gloss on it, and they would have felt good about that as well, Will. So yeah, no, it was a good showing by Connacht, and they won comfortably enough in the end. And I'm sure, hopefully, like that'll be something that they can kind of kick on with now. I think what I will say, you know, having Hansen and Aki in that backline is pretty important for them. You know, I do think they need him. They don't. You wouldn't want him out for like kind of a month or two now with a bad kind of. Obviously, Ireland would be a disaster for Ireland too,
Yeah.
but it'd be a real disaster for Connacht. I think he's a big part of what goes on there. You know, you think about the Leinster game. He was the guy that threw the key pass at the start of that game. You know, for the Hawkshaw try. He's a big player for them. You know, he had a few sloppy kicks on the weekend, but generally speaking, he's a real quality operator. As I said earlier in the podcast, I'm a huge fan of his, and I think, you know, alongside Blade, I think JJ's been a good signing for them as well. I mean, his kicking was really, really good in the weekend, I thought,
And like when it
particularly
cut to
from
the
the deck.
close-ups of him kicking those penalties, like the win and the sideways rain, even though it
Yeah,
was in
no,
front
he
of the
was
post,
good.
I was
They
like,
were
oh
good
my
kicks,
god,
weren't
like
they? Yeah, they were. Like
this is
to
a
put
tough.
them in that position before the
Yeah,
try, like that must have been really, really pleasing for him, you know. And obviously, Cardi comes on and he keeps the kicking tee, so there's obviously a good vote of confidence in him there. So yeah, no, I think looked like they've been pretty astute. I think that forward pack actually looks fairly meaty when they've got the full kit out. You know, I think you know, back row, they made the up. Now, I did think they rode their luck with the referee, but you can only play what's there, and I thought they played him pretty well because they made Munster's ball miserable all day. They looked pretty illegal to me a lot, but they still were very, very good. And I think that's a good front row with Heffron and Beelum. And I do like. I know that Buckley is there, but I do think that. Um, oh God.
Peter Dooley.
Dooley, God, I'm so sorry. I played with Dooley for ages as well. Great
Poor
fella.
Peter Dooley.
Sorry, Dooley. Hope he's
You
not
spent
listening.
10 years
But
playing professional rugby and then someone just forgets your name.
I know. Sorry, man. I'm not getting much kip with these two babies. Disaster. But yeah, no, Dooley. That looked like a really good front row, didn't it, Will? And I think they made life very, very difficult for Munster throughout that match, and probably
I'm a big Joe
bar those
Joyce fan as
messy.
well.
Sorry.
I'm a big Joe Joyce fan as well. The new
Look,
second
I
rower.
have to say, no, they look good, didn't they? That pack is good. You know, when they're on their day, they're very, very difficult to play against, and I think in the sports grounds particularly. So, yeah, overall, they'll be really pleased to have ended that period with the win. You know, because they should have got that Leinster win at the start of it. That was thrown away, And, I think they were good for the win on the weekend, even though Munster had a few big opportunities.
Well, all in all, it was a very exciting start to rugby in 2024. I'd like to thank Luke for joining me on the first episode of the Left Wing podcast of the new year. We will be back next week with another show to discuss all the latest rugby news. And in the meantime, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or listen on independent.ie. So until next time, have a great new year and goodbye.